All right, welcome everybody to the middle school building project. This is our 5th community forum, so we're glad that those of you that are on are able to join us. And then this is also being taped so people can also watch it at home. And then we'll also post it to the website as well, so people can watch it later. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Bridget Goff, Superintendent of Walpole Public Schools. Before we get started, if you do have a question, you can put it in the Bill. Would you like them to put it in the Q&A or the chat box? Does it matter for you?
No, both work fine, Q&A or chat box.
Okay. And if you have a question or would like to speak, just raise your hand. Brian, does it matter if it's during the presentation? Would you like for them to wait until after the presentation?
It'd probably be easier to after. The presentation's rather quick.
Okay.
So I think if we get through everything, if they just want to hold their questions, if they raise their hand and want to be called on and speak live, we can let them do that. If they feel more comfortable just entering in the Q&A or the chat, then they feel free to do that as well.
Okay. And then we also are leaving time after the presentation for people to ask questions and give feedback, because we do want to make sure that we get your feedback. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and you can start it.
Sure. So I'm Brian Jarvis, Project Director for Compass Project Management. We're the owner's project manager for the Walpole Middle School project. It's our 5th community forum, as Dr. Goff mentioned. I was also Senior Project Manager for the town on the public safety buildings and the senior center. So I've been working in Walpole for quite a while. With us tonight, we also have members from TAPE Architects, Chris Blesson, as well as members of the project team. And we'll introduce them in a little bit. The agenda is a quick update on where the project currently is. We're in the schematic design phase of the project. We'll give you an update on some of the things that have been happening since the last community forum, where things stand from a sustainability, energy efficiency aspect on the project. That is a big topic in today's construction world, as well as just general facilities management. So talk about what we're thinking for the current project and some of the things we've done and steps we've taken so far. We'll also get into the Mass School Building Authority scope and budget agreement, which is the next phase of the project. So after schematic design is submitted in early July, we would spend the summer, the town working with the MSBA to finalize budgets and numbers and reimbursements and all of that information by the end of the summer, and get that ready for presenting to the town in the fall prior to town meeting. And then ways that people can stay informed and involved, and again, wrap up with some questions and discussion. So we already talked about how you can ask a question and get your voices heard. Also, you can type them in the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll go through those at the end. We also had a few emails that came in prior to the forum that we'll read through and try to answer those questions as well. If we can't answer a question for whatever reason, if you send us an email, we will get back to you with more detail. Introduction to the project team. Usually Mark does this, but for those of you who've seen these before, you're familiar with the Walpole School Building Committee. It's comprised of representatives from multiple committees across the town. The school committee, superintendent of schools, assistant superintendent, principals, as well as finance committee, board of selectmen, town administration, as well as the permanent building committee are all representative on the Walpole School Building Committee. There's also 2 community representatives on the committee as well, to get a voice from the community at large represented on the committee. Compass Project Management, as I mentioned, is the owner's project manager for the project, the OPM. TAPE Architects was selected as the design firm for this project. Tonight we have Chris Blesson, who's been the lead principal on this project. We also had the services of New Vista Design, who did a lot of the visioning with the school and the administration in the early parts of the feasibility study to come up with some of the ideas and thoughts and big picture principles for the design. And we're also obviously partnering with the Mass School Building Authority, and they're one of the partners on this project, and we report up to them on all the major milestones. So quickly, for those, this might be your first community forum, or if you're just catching up, the general project timeline. We've been in the feasibility and schematic phase, which is the first phase with the MSBA, basically coming up with what the preferred solution is, a budget and a schedule that eventually gets presented to the town for approval, funding, and a vote. If that is successful, then the MSBA moves the project into the design phase. So we're really in the early stages of the project. However, it's a very important stage because this is where the MSBA actually sets the project budget and the reimbursement percentage for a town. They do that at the end of schematic design, which is happening this summer, at which point they lock you in to a project funding agreement, and that is what the town, and that is the budget that the town and the district lives with for the remainder of the project. So the feasibility phase started late 2020 and ended this February with a submission to the MSBA. It's where we come up with actually the preferred solution. We started with a bunch of concepts and narrowed it down to one. We're currently in the schematic design phase, where you take that one concept and start to big picture, kind of what does the building look like? What are the things that are in the building? What does the budget look like, et cetera? Again, very, very big picture from a design perspective, more of a narrative of what things are like versus actual detailed designs. We'll submit that to the MSBA at beginning of July, and then spend the summer working with the MSBA to finalize scope, budget, and schedule, and the MSBA's funding commitment, as we mentioned previously, by the end of August. They have a board meeting on August 25th. From August 25th until town meeting on April 18th, we'll be getting all of that final information out to the community and the public so everyone understands and can make an informed decision at town meeting. And then if moved to a ballot, the ballot vote will be in November. At which time, if it passes, then the project will actually enter the design stage of the project, which will last about a year through all of 2022, with a construction start possibly in late 2022, early 2023. And right now, preliminarily, the construction could be completed late summer 2024, about a year, 18 months, 20 months or so, to open the doors for first day of school 2024. So that's very high level of a schedule. From a kind of a graphic perspective, started all the way back with selection of OPM in February of 2020. We're up to the 5th community forum. We're submitting schematic design report to the MSBA on July 7th. Their board meeting is the August 25th, and then town meeting, as I mentioned, is 10/18, and a vote on November 2nd. So how did we get to this point quickly? After the designer, Taipei, was brought on board, we started to look at concepts. The MSBA made the project and the district look at 7 solution scenarios. So basically, that is a renovation of the existing Bird, an add reno to Bird, or an add reno to Johnson, or a new building at Johnson, or a new building at Bird. Basically 7 different paths that the project could possibly take. The town had deemed the Johnson and the Bird site as the 2 only viable options for a middle school. The district was also allowed to look at dual enrollment studies. So would it be for a single middle school, meaning just the Bird, or would you actually combine the projects, the schools, into one project, so have a dual enrollment of 905 students? At the beginning, based on both possible enrollments and the 7 different scenarios, you had 19 concepts that the committee was working through. The decision was made to go with a combined enrollment of 905 students, so make 1 combined middle school at the end of 2020. By doing that, obviously all the single school enrollments options came off the table. The addition and renovation to Johnson for 905 students was deemed not practical by the committee. The Johnson site is really constricted as far as the existing building goes, and some of those wetlands and the VFW and things of that nature just made for an addition renovation very difficult to do. So that was eliminated. So we basically moved forward with with 6 concepts for a combined middle school, 1 being an addition renovation of the existing Bird to increase the size for 905 students, 4 new buildings on the Bird site. 1 was located on the fields closest to East Street. 1 was located closer to Washington Street, and 2 were located kind of between Washington Street and the existing building, one of them being a phase project. And then 1 new building option was presented for the uplands, meaning the area with all the pine trees up on the hill at the Johnson site. Those were evaluated by the building committee across multiple criteria. And at the end of the day, 1 new building, a combined middle school on the Bird site between the existing school and Washington Street was selected. That was the preferred schematic that was submitted to the MSBA at the end of February, along with a bunch of information that goes along with that option. That was approved by the MSBA board after their review in the middle of April, and the project moved into schematic design, which is where we are currently. Some of the milestones of those earlier submissions, one of the very first things that the district had to do was come up with an educational program. As I mentioned earlier, we used consultant New Vista Design to help lead that effort. Basically the district's vision for middle school education in Walpole and how that relates to a building space, whether that's ad reno or new, the types of spaces, the types of curriculum that are currently offered, that could be offered, that in the future could be offered if they had a different space. How that relates to a physical space in a space summary, evaluating the conditions at all of the potential sites was part of that initial preliminary design program. And then they put together a very rough conceptual budget and schedule based on those preliminary options. From there, they got narrowed down into a short list, final options analysis, updated budgets and schedules, et cetera. And then the building committee comes up with what they believe is the most cost-effective and educationally appropriate solution for the project, which was the new building on the Bird site. That was submitted to the MSBA at the end of February. As I mentioned, approved by their facility assessment team in March, and then their board formally approved it in April, which moved us into schematic design, where we currently are. Some of the details that come into schematic design as we start the preliminary design, about 30% of the design, as I mentioned, fairly high level. We do a preliminary traffic analysis related to site circulation and getting to and from the site. We get public input from town safety officials, look at code requirements, access requirements, sustainability, energy efficiency. Room data sheets was actually starting to lay out rooms and what rooms might look like with furniture or built-in storage and things of that nature. We'll look at all the mechanical, fire protection, and technology systems and come up with narratives of these are the types of systems that we want to put in the building. Not much more detail than that, other than in general, these are the types of systems and how we lay them out. Talk about project delivery system. Are we going to bid the project? Are we going to hire a construction manager at risk? And then do updated construction cost estimates. And the big takeaways from schematic design, which is what's getting submitted to the MSBA in the beginning of July, are we update the total project budget based on the schematic design estimate, has a little bit more detail than the first estimates that were done earlier on. We update the project schedule and we update the project scope. And this gets submitted into the MSBA, and this is what they evaluate and negotiate all this coming summer, and they lock you in and determine what the maximum MSBA reimbursement is going to be. And that's based on their evaluation of all project costs and what are eligible, what are ineligible, and what they're willing to commit to reimburse the town of Walpole for. And as I mentioned, that'll go in July and be negotiated through the summer with a formal board meeting with the MSBA at the end of August. So that's kind of how we got to this point. Right now, I'll turn it over to Chris Blesson from Cape Architects to talk a little bit more in detail about the schematic design.
Right. Thanks, Brian. So far, what we've done since we had the initial schematic design building footprint laid out is that we started to go through a fairly robust series of activities. Those are listed here in this slide, and I'll just go through a few of them, but there's programming meetings that occur with all the teachers, administrators, and basically all of the different departments within the building and also within the town to get a detailed description of what might be needed in the building, ways that we can respond with design to, maybe take care of some things that are frustrating now or things that they don't have now, but things that the new building can resolve. And then we update those plans accordingly. So we look at all of the systems. We actually scheduled some energy charrettes to better understand kind of what systems we can do. High-level look at their effect on operations and potential savings. That process is actually still ongoing, which is a bullet point later on. We looked at several things around generator sizes. We looked at security, and we continued to develop the site plan and think through the traffic and impacts around the site. I think there's a few more bullet points on this slide. If Brian, if you can scroll down a little, and a couple of other the big ones is that with the energy charrette, we were looking at ways to really bring down the energy use and tune in the systems that are going to go into the building, and also look at the building massing and layout so that we can get good materials, good orientation for solar, and things like that. We've also done some background noise sampling so that we understand what the sort of ambient sound is on the site, so that whatever we do with the building, it doesn't add to that, that we design the building in a way that maintains or doesn't contribute to adding noise to the site. You can go to the next slide. So the site plan has been updated, and this is the current iteration of that. The big takeaway here is that through a lot of process and conversation, we've arrived at the most, the best solution for traffic around the site and on the site is having two access roads. One where it currently is, which is to Washington Street, and then another access road that goes out to East Street. And you can see both of those here in this diagram going off to the east and west side of the site. We have heard some comments and emails from the public about concerns with the road going out to East Street, and we are still working through some of the nuances around that. But from a traffic perspective, this is the most tenable solution, to have and allow cars and buses to enter and exit on both sides of the site. And that really relieves much of the traffic constraints that are happening at the intersection down on Washington Street there to the south. And you can start to see in this diagram the amount of parking we're looking for, the site orientation, and some of the ways that the building is connecting to the landscape, which is the fields right across the road, and a few of the outdoor learning environments between some of the educational pods and outdoor classrooms. So it gives a lot of opportunity for students to engage with the environment, but also takes the maximum advantage of the site. And for reference, the existing bird is basically right where that parking lot is in front of the building right now. So you can go to the next slide. So we've been starting to look at some massing models and elevations and renderings. And so this is a quick collage of what the building might look like from the south side of the site. And, there's a lot of work that needs to continue to happen. As Brian noted, this is schematic design early phase. So there's not as much detail as what would happen in the next phase. But this starts to give us our direction and scope and budget for the project. And you can sort of see all those elements I just talked about there. In the last slide, the site planning side, brought into a three-dimensional rendering type of view. So you can go to the next slide. Some more rendered views of the building looking around here. This is a potential view of the cafeteria. So, we want the space to be nice and bright and have good access to the outdoors. Just beyond those doors and the glass up to the north is actually an outdoor seating and terrace area that's pretty well protected from being, it's not open to the site in any way, like from East Street or Washington Street. And so it's in a good spot to have, on the nice days, the students can choose to eat outside. And I think maybe what I'm hearing from multiple sources is that one of the positive things about COVID has been that we've all been trudging outside more often from the learning environment. And so providing good, safe places to do that might be one of the good takeaways from this last year that we've had. So yeah, and go to the next slide. So another rendering spot here is just this is really the main entry area. So just to the right of this image would be the front main doors to the building. And then you come in and there's this stair that takes you right up to the second floor or the third floor. And just in the distance there in this image on all three floors are the major classroom wings. And so this just gives you a sense of how one of the things in school environments that we like to see is that when you come in the main door, you can kind of see where you're going. So from this one spot, you can actually see all 3 floors and understand the layout, generally speaking. And then when you get to that destination up top, you can also see where you came from. So it gives you light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, but also really helps you orient into the environment well if you've never been here or if you're a new student just arriving for the first time. You can go to the next slide. So the floor plans are updated and progressing rapidly at this point. They lay out as you see here. So the first floor on the left, and then second and third floor as you go across the page to the right. The first floor, I'll start with the bottom portion of the screen, and that's the classroom portions, and that's the same on all 3 floors. So it has 3 distinct neighborhoods or learning environments, and those are connected by a center sort of organizing hallway coming right down the spine. And then there's a tech classroom at the end of each of those wings. And so a lot of strong symmetry here. Every floor is exactly the same. And it stacks perfectly on all 3 floors. So you can imagine multiple different ways to arrange the school, but I think the early thinking now is maybe 6th, 7th, 8th on separate floor plates, but they're all equitable and all the same. So identifiable, easy to get around, easy to remember, not a lot of mystery to the building. Where the building does differ is on the upper portion of the floor plan. So the first floor has in the brown there is the administration area. So that's where the principals are, the nurses, the secretaries, any kind of admin function that is not necessarily hands-on teaching all day. And then the gray spot up there is the back of house. So like the kitchen and deliveries and storage, things like that. That green area to the right of that is the cafeteria. And then you can see there labeled is the auditorium stage and the band room. And so those elements are all on the first floor. And then if you go to the second floor, just to the right, you'll see that what stacks above that is right where the cursor is. There's a green media center. So that's the library. The brown there is the guidance area. So any of the guidance counselors or that kind of activity. And then the gyms, the PE, and the locker rooms are all on the northern portion of that on the second floor. And then to the right of that, you see the upper portion of the auditorium. So the auditorium has a section of sort of more flat seating that is sloped on grade, and then the back portion of the seats slope up like stadium seating, like you might find at the movie theater or something. And the very back end of that auditorium actually is at the second floor level. So you can access the auditorium from the second floor right there as well. So, and then the third floor stacks perfectly on that. And on that northern end of the building, there is no program. It's all just sort of 2-story height spaces. So the gym is a fairly tall space and the auditorium is a tall space. And I think that's it for the floor plans. So this is an AXON. That's a sort of architectural drawing term that we use where it just takes a floor plan and tilts it a little bit so that you can kind of get a little bit of a third dimension to that. So this is the second floor plan that you just saw in the image above, but tilted in the third dimension. So you can kind of make a little bit more spatial reference out of it. And you can start to see how the academic neighborhoods come together with breakout learning pods and the technology rooms that support all of those 21st century education needs and the science rooms. All of that starts to come together. And you can see it a little bit more clearly if reading floor plans is not necessarily your thing. This might help you see that in another way. You can go to the next slide. So as we've touched on a couple of times here, we are taking a really hard look and a deep look at sustainability and energy efficiency. There are a lot of initiatives through the state. There's current legislation that that is talking about public buildings getting to a net zero energy by 2050. And in addition to that, the MSBA offers additional reimbursement points for higher levels of sustainability and energy savings. We are on target for those 2% points, which I'm sure Brian will speak to more later. But the big thing here is that we're trying to explore and analyze ways that we can make the building as energy efficient or net zero ready as possible. So we want to set you up for success. You may not buy solar now. You may not do some of the energy generation or making energy on site as part of this project. But we want to make sure we design the building with as low of an energy use as possible, so that when you do get to that point, you do have a chance to get to net zero potentially. But the big thing for us is just really take a long, hard look at making the building as efficient and sustainable as possible, given the funds and budget that we have. The building is sited pretty optimally for solar, and the building envelope is going to be, very well developed. So I think we're going to see some really good numbers. Right now, we're in the middle of doing some complex energy modeling on that. So more to come. Please attend one of the building committees coming up if you want to know more. But I think that's it for me at this point. Right?
Thanks, Chris. So that's where we are with schematic design. As I mentioned, next steps with the MSBA is the scope and budget process with them. Schematic design submission, as we mentioned earlier, will go into the MSBA on July 7th. They will review and approve that. All the substantive details and parameters of the project scope, budget, and schedule, and what they call a scope and budget agreement. So that's a formal document that kind of outlines big picture, what is in the project, what the budget is, and what the schedule is for the project. They will also review all of the projected costs of the project for reimbursement, and they will certify a reimbursement rate for all eligible incurred costs. And they will come up with what they call a total facilities grant, or the max reimbursement that they will commit to for the project. So we have a preliminary percentage right now we'll talk about in a minute, and that'll get finalized by the end of August. And that all gets memorialized at their MSBA board meeting on August 25th, as we mentioned earlier, after which that all that information then becomes part of the presentations to all the public entities, to the community, to all the town committees, eventually town meeting, and then potentially put to a town ballot on November 2nd. If the project is approved, the MSBA and the town will execute what they call a project funding agreement, which basically will lock in the project funding and the project budget at the initial stages of design. And at that time, the project would move into design, and the town could start submitting eligible costs for reimbursement during the design phase. So currently, we have a feasibility study agreement with the MSBA for the initial 1.5 that was appropriated, 1.5 million that was appropriated by town meeting for this phase of the project. And the town has been submitting reimbursement requests to the MSBA, and they've been reimbursing the town at the agreed upon rate of 48% up through schematic design. So if this project moves forward, we'll do another agreement called the project funding agreement, and that'll fund the project up through we get a final construction cost, whether that's bid or through a CM. There'll be a bid amendment to the project funding agreement, and that'll right when the beginning of construction starts, and that locks in the final numbers with the MSBA. But coming out of this summer, heading into town meeting, the town is going to know the maximum reimbursement that the MSBA will give the town, and what that reimbursement rate will be, and what the project budget is, and what the MSBA will hold the town to that budget throughout the course of the project. So this is a summary of some of the information that was presented at the prior community forums and a few building committees, just for those joining us or curious or have questions. We can go into more detail if you have questions. The total project budget that we've been working with since the start of the feasibility study is roughly 115 to 120 million. The last estimate was 116. We have an estimate currently ongoing for schematic design, and that'll be in by the end of June. That project includes the 161,000 square feet of the new building, which includes the auditorium, central kitchen, a third gym space, and CM at risk as a delivery method versus design bid build. So that's in that total project cost. The MSBA stated reimbursement with the current feasibility study agreement is just over 48%. It's 48.6. We think that's going to go up to as high as 52. As Chris mentioned earlier, we think we'll get an additional 2% for energy efficiencies. on the project, as well as an additional percentage in a half or so for some of the maintenance procedures that the town has currently in place that'll bump that 48 up closer to 52. However, as explained in previous community forums, and if you want more detail, there's a lot of detail in the slides from community forum number 4, which are available on the website, which kind of explain the MSBA's process for eligibility, what they determine to be eligible, how they calculate those costs. So you start out at a stated rate of 48 to 52, but by the time they review projects and take out what they deem to be ineligible, they do this on every project. It's not specific to Walpole. The realized rate at the end of the day that Walpole will actually receive will end up being closer to 30 to 35% of the total project budget. So, a project budget of 115 to 120, 48 to 52%, but not all project costs are eligible. At the end of the day, we're projecting is going to give Walpole about 30 to 35% in reimbursements back. So leaving it a town with a town share to fund of approximately $80 million out of the original 115 or 120. So as I mentioned, the schematic design estimates currently in process. When we get that back in June, we're going to update all of this. Our goal is to maintain or better this total project budget. That all gets submitted to the MSBA along with the draft total project budget, at which time they'll start to go through, they'll analyze, review, and eliminate any ineligible costs and come up with that actual reimbursement percentage. All that gets finalized and will be approved by the town and the MSBA at their board meeting on 8/25. And again, to kind of summarize a previous slide from prior community forums, what does that mean to the taxpayers? So that $80 million approximate share, the town ran some numbers based upon a 30-year level debt at 3.5%, which is probably a little bit conservative. $80 million, what does that mean to the average taxpayer? If the average single-family assessed home in Walpole is just over $550,000, a range, give or take $5 million on each side of $80 million, gives a taxpayer between $423 and $478 per year. And obviously, you can see based on where your assessed value might fall, what that means to your tax bill. One thing of note, and it's been a couple questions that have come up based on the project having an auditorium, which is, as mentioned in previous community forums and building committees, their MSBA doesn't recognize auditoriums as part of a middle school program. For whatever reason, they have not done that. That doesn't mean you cannot build them. Many middle schools do build them. Most of the middle schools that we have worked on have built auditoriums. The district and the town felt that the auditorium supports the school program, both academically, extracurricularly, and also as part of the community. But the MSBA does not recognize that. So if you weren't to build the auditorium, roughly 75 million would be the town share, a couple $1 million off for the cost of the auditorium. But when you look at the delta between that amount and the current estimated cost of the project with an auditorium, it's roughly a delta of $13 to $55 at the end of the day as far as the tax impact goes. Again, estimated approximate numbers, we'll have an updated estimate with the schematic design, but that is how the project is moving forward. So again, to reiterate, here's currently here just at the beginning of June. We'll get the schematic design in beginning of July. Work with the MSBA all summer to come up with final numbers for the project, and then get that out to the public and committees, et cetera, leading up to town meeting in October and potentially town ballot vote, which is scheduled right now for November 2nd. How can you stay informed and involved? We do have a project website. It's through the school's website. Everything that has been presented tonight, as well as all the building committee, school committee presentations, summaries of MSBA submittals, frequently asked questions, monthly reports are all on the website, including a video of the existing BMS conditions. There's also a couple summary handouts that summarize a lot of the project information if you just want a quick 1 or 2 pager to catch up on where things are at. Do check that out. We do update that after every meeting as quickly as possible. And there's also links, I believe, to Walpole Cable Media, who definitely stream this meeting as well as building committee meetings. I urge you also to check out the Mass School Building Authority's website. They have a lot of great information there. You can actually get actual costs of every project ever built with the MSBA to see how Walpole stacks up. We have a couple of those slides if people have questions tonight. Walpole their pricing has just gone into the MSBA from the last estimate, so they have that updated. but you can see all the projects currently in process and that have been built to date with the MSBA, and learn about all of the requirements that they have for their projects. If you have a question or a comment, there is an email address. We do respond back to those. If you have a question before forums, we'll try to read them here. That we will get back to you as soon as we find the person with the right information to respond to you. And then how can you stay up to date? We have an updated school building committee meeting on June 8th, so next Tuesday. We have one following on June 22nd. And we are, now that the state's COVID regulations are lifting and the open meeting laws, I believe, right now are targeted to be lifted on possibly on June 15th. We do expect these meetings and building committees and to be more in person or a hybrid model very soon. And we also plan to start doing smaller community forums. I know we need to get out in front of the seniors, possibly at the senior center or another venue, to get some folks that might not have all the technology connections. But those are coming. We have heard those requests, and as soon as the town kind of gives us the go ahead, we'll be out there. So with that really ends the presentation. Again, questions, raise your hand if you'd like to speak. And we ask, if you do raise your hand and would like to speak, that you just identify yourself. Or you can throw a question or comment in the QA feature and we'll try to get you an answer. And I think, Bridget, you have...
yeah, Brian, I think we've got a couple, maybe, Bill, you can read any of that are in the Q&A and chat, and then we could go to the raised hands.
Okay, I'll read one from the chat that I believe... I'm not sure if it was answered, so let me just read it. From Travis Dixon wrote, I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead of this being answered. What about sidewalks being installed in the schools? Why? I believe that's supposed to say side of Washington Street, East Street, and High Plain Street. This is an abutting neighbor, and kids often are cutting through, and one asks, the kids say it's safer due to no sidewalks.
Good question. Chris, on the site plan, I'm not sure if we have the details yet of exactly where the pedestrian, but we are planning on doing pedestrian access from both Washington and East Street sides. I know either improving the path from East Street that's there now, maybe on the southerly side, and I know we do have plans to improve the path out to Washington Street. The extent of the sidewalk along Washington Street in either direction, I don't know if we've got into that detail yet, because we're also coordinating with some plans that the MBTA has for sidewalks out there. If you want to add anything.
We don't currently have in the plans that are being estimated, we don't currently have off-site improvements. So those kind of things are considered off-site improvements typically. And so there's none of that in the plan at the moment, but that's just.
Yeah, so I think we have sidewalks to get to those streets, and then there'll be a coordination with the town if there's going to be sidewalks along those streets, or improve those sidewalks along those streets. I think we have crosswalks at both ends of the site, Chris, to get to sidewalks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think we will incorporate something there, but.
So Travis, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, we'll go to the next question that's in the Q&A to be read aloud, and I do see a participant hand is up. We'll go to that person next. So from Robert Damish, I thought under our town charter, the townwide ballot had to be at least 30 days after approval at town meeting. Just double checking. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian, I can take this one. So, Mr. Damish, I'm not sure what provision of the charter that you're referencing. If you want to reach out to us directly, we can kind of work through that together. We work with our town council to make sure that the ballot initiative was properly presented to the select board before it was approved for that November 2nd date. So if you want to reach out to us directly tomorrow, we can take a look at that in more detail, but I'm not familiar with that provision that you're referencing.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
So we do have a couple of questions that were emailed.
Why don't
get those two after we take some others?
Yeah, why don't I take the participant? I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name, Jeannie Gagne or Gagny. I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you can go ahead and ask your question. You are not muted. Go ahead.
Yep. Hi, this is Mark with Jeannie. So,
Hi, Mark.
hey there. So I live on Grasshopper, and I've been following along for the last couple of months. One of the big concerns, and I don't hear anything substantial to refute this, is it's just not feasible to have a bus route go to East Street. And the simple fact is it's just so unsafe. A little bit of background here. I personally went to the Walpole Police. I pulled records of any accidents and all accidents only within a 10-year period of the corners of High Plain and East, separate Beth and Grasshopper and East. On High Plain side, over 35 accidents reported that I can show you, over 35 accidents. And we've been at Grasshopper in Walpole since 2011. So there have been 4 accidents right out on East and Beth and Grasshopper. And one of those accidents, the car literally was thrown from East Street right into the neighbor that's right on the edge of East, into the driveway. So first of all, the whole idea then of taking and adding additional traffic to East Street, and with how high accident rate it already is, we're asking for just more trouble trying to go down that path. The other thing that I would add to that is that by introducing a bus route to East, we know what's going to happen there. Parents are going to circumvent going to Washington. They're going to come down to East. They're going to pull up and live park on Grasshopper, on Beth, and on East Street, and they're going to pick their kids up there, adding more traffic and problems to that area. The third point I would make is that I don't know when you plan on doing the East Street study. And from what I understand, it's literally putting something across the road and catching frequency of vehicles going across. I don't know what else is involved with it, but that's just not even close to telling the story of why it's so unsafe to families, our children, for doing that road. That's it. Thank you.
I just actually want to add, this is Jeannie, the traffic is going to be vastly increased, and so for commuters coming up East Street, dealing with High Plains Street, everyone turns around in Grasshopper Lane as it is. Folks, Grasshopper Lane is not your personal turnaround, but that's what happens. It's going to be triple, quadrupled. Everyone who's living along this road is up in arms because it's going to make our quality of life awful. Also, I've heard nobody address how you're planning on cutting into the berm along all of our properties, how our properties are going to be affected, street lights. I just hear glossy answers, and we'd really like this is a serious impact on dozens of homes on this side of the property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bill, anything else?
There's no answers. I'll read some questions we received in emails. So one is, what will be done with the existing middle schools?
So I'll start with that. So the Bird Middle School will be demolished, as Chris mentioned in the presentation. The location of the existing Bird will be the new parking lot in front of what would be the new building. That'll be part of the project through the MSBA and eligible for reimbursement as it's required for the construction of the project. The Johnson will be, the town will need to do further study on the potential uses of that. But that obviously, if the project is approved and that becomes a reality, then the town will move into a study phase on how best to use Johnson moving forward. Pat, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that, or
No, Brian, I think you nailed it. The town would need to study that more about what the reuse options in that building would be.
Okay, another question from that same email. Since an up-to-date learning experience is a key benefit of the project, what are some of the specific programs that will be added which cannot be administered in the existing middle schools?
Sorry, I went in and out, Bill. Could you say that again?
Yes. Since an up-to-date learning experience is a key benefit of the project, what are some of the specific programs that will be added which cannot be administered in the existing middle schools?
Sure. How long do you have? I'll start, Bill, and then maybe you can, if I miss anything, you can fill in. Like, for example, each team and neighborhood, I believe Chris had mentioned this probably in past sessions, talking about, and he mentioned it today when you look at the design, have STEAM labs that serve multiple purposes. And that's science, technology, the engineering, arts, and math. And I believe, I'll just give you a specific example. Back, I think it was 2017, we had each year we had a small group of 7th graders from the middle schools that would volunteer to participate in what's known as a project-based learning initiative. And that culminated with an end of the year project and celebration. And the scope was extremely limited, and it was due to lack of space. So we're really limited by our structure and our space. So we were not able to hold these collaborative and interactive work that they do in problem solving. We actually had to try to go off site, try to use a library, and it wasn't feasible. So it just really prohibited us from having the expansion of PBL across the entire grade or even across the school. So having these larger flexible workspaces really allows the team for this collaboration, these exploration, inquiry, presentation that would enable us to expand to all grade levels. Another example, Bird Middle School and also Johnson Middle School, I know that, for example, with Bird, attempted to repurpose a room as a general makeshift space for a learning lab. Along with that was the news production team. And then add to that for fun was the orchestra, trying to fit all of these programs into one space. And it was really a struggle and it was impossible. Having these 21st century learning spaces would enable a middle school news team and production team that what they're able to do and continue to film not only every morning, but during the school day, after school, and really have a nice feeder program into the Walpole High School, which has a fantastic cable and production program, and also partnering with our Walpole Media Corporation, and we've been with meetings with them. Our robotics program is just the third example. And that runs maybe during an extension block or after school hours, very limited in space. It's out of a classroom. So really having these labs to have this creativity, this collaboration, and problem solving skills, and having these. Bill, did I leave anything out? I just wanted to give some specific examples.
Yeah, those are some great programming examples. Just to add to it, 21st century learning means, circuit breakers that don't trip in our science classrooms. 21st century learning means equity for all of our special education programs, that students don't have to compromise their neighborhoods or friends to participate in the special education program that makes the most sense for them. A far more robust music and arts program with space that allows for us to maximize these programs in a way that services and supports all of our students. And I include in that physical education activities and a lot of the programs that you already spoke to, so I won't be too repetitive or redundant. All right, with that said, there is another hand raise, Anna Desantis. Anna, I will unmute you and allow you to talk at this time.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Anna Desantis, and I also live on Grasshopper Lane. And I'd like to make a comment. First of all, I agree with Jeannie and Mark that this project, even though we agree with the school being built, we support the school, the abutters of this area do not support the road coming down onto East Street. And I feel like the school committee and the selectmen of the town are not listening to the abutting neighbors. We raise our hand, we speak, we come to the town. I personally went down to speak to the town administrator, and we have heard nothing. This is a serious issue for this area. The people here, we are concerned about our safety. When I tell you that there was an accident and it ended up on the front street of the yellow house right on the corner of Grasshopper and East, the neighbors end up moving because their child almost got killed. There's also a fatality of Anna Dubois and Nick Kelly, who killed right on the High Plain. Those are just a few issues that are happening in this area. On top of that, we didn't sign up when we purchased our homes to have a road in our backyard. There's a safety issue that is also for the children that are playing on the fields. I also feel like you're not being honest with the people as far as the cost for this project. You're kind of over glossing what's actually going on. Yes, it's a major project, but there is no need for you to bring a street onto East Street when it's always been grandfathered in on Washington. There's, it should stay on Washington where it's always been, and, that's where it should be. There's no need for it to come down this area. There's trucks, events being held at the school with buses and trucks, and we didn't sign up for that. Our property values are being affected and the safety of the neighbors in this area. And you guys need to hear us. We're concerned, and we are also taxpayers, and we need to be heard, and addressed. And you need to think about the road that's being put here. You just can't put a road in our yard and on our streets and expect us just to sit down and, accept it, because it's not right.
Does someone want to respond? I know that Mrs. Gagné also gave some feedback in terms of that, and also looking at, the property and what that's going to look like in terms of the driveway, and then also in terms of the roadway and the safety, just giving them some feedback. Oh, Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry. I hear what the neighbors are saying. We've definitely had some communications back and forth on email with the project team. And again, I think that, the intent is not to, have negative impacts as much as possible to the surrounding areas. I think the goal of the project is realizing that, a combined middle school is deemed to be the right solution for the town. And so obviously, that's going to include additional traffic coming to the site, whether it's staff or buses or cars, in one form or another. And I think with the professional staff that's been looking at this, as well as conversations with public safety, with the police, with the first responders, the police and first responders actually requested an additional entrance to the site. So we started kind of with that initial thought. Student safety was also one of the premier aspects of this by trying to separate the bus and the car traffic with two additional loops. And there's one of the ways that we thought of that was having the access for buses off of East Street. We did do follow-up conversations with DPW and transportation. Again, trying not to impact all of the intersections in that area that are already, I think, as the traffic studies have shown, already not the best intersection. So from a safety perspective, the goal was trying to disperse the traffic coming to the site as much as possible and to give folks as many options, and eventually people find the best option for them without all going to the same, overly congested intersections. I know there's already work in the plans for a couple of the intersections related to in-town projects that are not part of this project that are could help with some of that. But I think that from the project perspective and from the school's perspective, access for pickup and drop off from both Washington and East is a vital solution to the project and helps with helping to mitigate some of the traffic impacts to the surrounding area. Now, that being said, we do hear the concerns of some of the abutters, Ms. Gagne and Desantis. The goal is that none of this work would be happening on their property. Obviously, everything needs to stay on school property. Things, I think the town has a history of being involved with some of the prior projects I'm familiar with. I know that they have responded to neighbors' concerns, whether it's with fencing or plantings to screen things, lighting from this perspective. There will be lighting studies done on the project so that no lights are leaving the property. Everything is shrouded, so it's just on what it needs to be on and not going opposite directions and things of that nature. A lot of those details have not been worked out yet. Again, at the schematic design level, we basically are just saying we have a road going to East Street in general, and we don't have necessarily all of the details worked out as to what that might look like from a grading perspective or from a fencing or a planting perspective. But I think in big picture terms, the town and the district feel that this is the best solution for the overall school and the vicinity and the surrounding intersections based on the information we receive from the professionals who are looking at this.
Brian, can I just make a comment on that too in response to the previous speaker? So I've spoken to the previous speaker myself, and I know that she's spoken to the town administrator, and we had a pretty in-depth conversation. And I know that the chairperson of the school building committee, Mr. Breen, had sent a response to the residents of Grasshopper Lane earlier this week. So about the response about the transparency and the responsiveness, I know that there's been responses that have been sent out, and I know that the school building committee has also taken it up at several of their meetings to discuss that road. So I just wanted I think there was a comment made about lack of responsiveness. And I know that, yourself and the chairperson of the school building committee and the school building committee itself has spent some time drafting responses to the residents and trying to work on some of those responses. And I think, the takeaway is what you just mentioned, that there are ways that we can try to mitigate that we've employed with previous projects that, at this stage might be a little preliminary, but we can certainly engage in those discussions down the line.
Yeah, and I think I'll add, I think it's one of the questions in the chat is that we're still working through, some of the concerns of it's being referred to as a road. The goal is that it's really a driveway entrance for the building, and whether that's used beyond pickup and drop off times is yet to be determined. I mean, we've done plenty of school projects where they have, limited access to certain areas of the site at certain times of day. They have security gates so people can't get to certain areas of the site. The concern is that, that would that become a cut through or something like that. So those are details that are still going to be worked out. I mean, right now the goal is that we're trying to mitigate the impacts of pickup and drop off time to that site, given the additional traffic. And I know that the bus ridership from Johnson is high, so hopefully, maybe that goes up, given the fact that students are now going to the Bird site, which would limit some of the cars, but we are planning for projected car traffic. So, and another thing I think that the project is also aware of is the conditions along East Street, given the ball fields that are there and some of the parking that goes on, including, I believe, on Beth and on Grasshopper, that people are parking there for access to the field. So some of the things that have been talked about with the project is how do we resolve those issues and get those cars out of those areas and keep them on site or get them better access to the parking lot, up on the site versus along East Street, which is extremely dangerous, or in the neighborhood streets, turning around and dropping things off. So there's a lot of details to be worked out. I think that right now we're at the big picture of we're giving is this driveway provides as many options as possible to try to work out some of these issues, and I think that's where it stands right now.
Okay, I'm going to move on to read two questions and combine a question and a Q&A and from the chat about staffing. So what would happen to the JMS staff, and would middle school teachers still have their jobs with a combined middle school? So obviously our number of students is not going down, so we will still need a robust and strong staff to meet our student to staff ratio. So many of our staff will remain employed in the combined middle school. It's very difficult for us to project right now without doing a full program evaluation as we get later in this project, all the details of staffing. but we do not see a massive reduction in staffing. And so hopefully that addresses that question. Another question that came up, actually, excuse me, there's another hand raised. I'm going to unmute Dahlia to speak, and we'll take that question. Hold on one second. Okay, Dahlia, if you unmute yourself, you should have the option to speak now. I see that you are unmuted, so if you just go ahead and speak. Okay, there must have been some problems there. That person has lowered their hand or exited. I'll read another question from the Q&A. And I believe, Brian, you just touched upon this, but I want to make sure that we read all the questions. Will the bus lane adjacent to the abutters on Grasshopper Lane only be in use for buses twice per school days for pickup and drop off? And is it not open to public vehicle traffic? I don't know, Brian, you just touched upon that. If you want to repeat what you said, I just want to make sure people know we're reading their questions. You're on mute right now.
Right now, we're talking about it as a pickup and drop off access lane. Obviously, for those 2 periods of the day, whether or not there's school day use, that hasn't been decided. That will become an operational decision for the school department. And then off hours use, I'm not sure. That'll be a combination of school department and public safety. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of things that have to be considered during the operation of that driveway. But right now, it's pick up and drop off.
All right, I think Dahlia has gotten back online. We'll give it another shot. I'll allow you to speak now. Okay, that was an unsettling call. I apologize for that. We will go to, I believe Jeannie has her hand, and I apologize if this is up from before, but I want to make sure I allow you to speak at this time.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, this is Jeannie Gagne speaking again. Still on the same topic up the road. And I just want to follow up and say, what basically the situation is I understand that you're trying to get the best infrastructure you can. But based on other schools in the area, there are schools, I believe it's Wellesley, one of our neighbors works there. There's a single lane, or rather single roadway with separate access for buses and for cars. And they have a way to work it out with loops. It really is possible for you not to impact the side of Walpole with such a drastic measure. And I hear you saying, yes, we hear you, but we're going to do what we're going to do anyway, which is incredibly upsetting to dozens of homes on this side.
It should be based on studies.
It should be based on studies. It should be based on the traffic study.
Did we lose her?
Yeah, we did. Can she come back on?
I don't know.
I think we need to close the chat also.
Yep. All right, I think let's wait and see if she's coming back on. For some reason, she got logged off, so we'll wait.
Yeah.
There she is.
Can you hear me? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, for some reason it went off. You can start again.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just trying to express that this is way larger than a couple of disgruntled neighbors. This is serious impact. When you realize that the existing traffic, which has a lot of commuters speeding along East Street, is now going to be tripled or quadrupled, you're talking about people coming all different directions. You're talking about buses stopping. In the emails that have gone back and forth, I've heard about access for delivery trucks. Is there going to be any kind of a gate? People are going to park on this road during games? There's not going to be a gate. Studies, where is the study, the traffic study? You currently have a study light thingy, I don't know what you call it, that's up on Grasshopper, rather on East Street right now, to show speeds and so forth going by. We would like to see, while school is still in session, an accurate traffic study done of current traffic during commuter times, during school pickup, school drop-off times, even during times of games along the road, so that we have actual data, factual data, not just ideas about what folks think might be the best way to do it to avoid traffic. And furthermore, as Anna Desantis said, there's already a very strong infrastructure on the Washington Street side. There is plenty of room there. There's existing infrastructure and lights and street lights. There's a wide swath of area where you could add extra lanes. I've heard that this committee doesn't want to cut trees down. That is way less of an impact. I love trees. I'm Mrs. Garden, but that would be way less of an impact than the damage that this will do to so many homes, to our quality of life, to have 2 years of trucks building alongside our road. And so we do support this project. We do understand that you're trying to come up with a solution that's the best for Walpole. The school looks beautiful. I wish the windows would open, but besides that, the school looks fabulous. Please, let's work together and give us, a collaborative process here where we, it's our tax dollars too. We want everyone to be safe and happy with this project instead of starting to hate the town right now.
Hey, Bill, can I just make a comment?
Yes, thank you.
The windows in the school will open, so I think we don't have to worry about that too much. And the completed traffic report and study, which is fairly in-depth and robust at this point, we'll finish that up, wrap it up soon, and I think we can make that available to the residents to review the impacts around the school and what's going on with that, and if additional work is needed as the project continues in design. Honestly, that's what the professional team is here to do. So I think first step is review what's available after it's printed and reported, which hopefully would be in the next couple weeks at the latest, and then continue the dialogue and echoing what all's already been said on this issue. So.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I apologize. We're not going to take any more live questions because even with the registration, some security's been breached. And so if you have, and we've also disabled our chat. So if you have a question that you would like asked, if you could please put it in the Q&A. I apologize for that inconvenience, but hopefully people understand why.
Is there a question in Q&A on the name of the school?
Yes, there is. What will the new school be named? And then there's also a question about the windows, but I believe Chris just answered that.
Well, right now, we're just calling it Walpole Middle School. We will need to wait until October and then, move forward from that. But right now, if with the middle school building project, we have Walpole Middle School.
I think we might need to wrap it up.
Okay, I think we will wrap it up at this time.
Yeah, I think we do, because it's a security breach, so we'll get off and then
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, if they have questions, they should send them to middle school building project, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.